My family walked out on my wedding. Hours later, my father returned with the police. I used to believe weddings were about love. White dresses, soft music, promises whispered under chandeliers and flowers. I knew wrong. My wedding was about power, control, and punishment. And it became the day my family lost me forever. Chapter 1. The day I thought I'd won. The ballroom smelled like roses and fresh linen. Sunlight poured through the tall glass windows, turning everything golden. Guests were seated. Music played softly, and I stood behind the doors in my wedding dress, hands shaking, not from fear but from happiness. I was finally free. Free from my father's rules. Free from my mother's silence. Free from a family that measured love by obedience. Ethan held my hands and smiled. "You ready?" he whispered. I nodded. "I've waited my whole life for this." The doors opened. I stepped forward. And that's when I noticed something was wrong. My side of the aisle was empty. Rows and rows of empty chairs. No parents, no siblings, no aunts, uncles, cousins, just nothing. A low murmur rippled through the room. I stopped walking. "Ethan," I whispered, "where's my music family?" He frowned. "They said they were coming." I scanned the room again, my heart pounding harder with every second. Then my phone vibrated. A message. "Dad, this wedding will not happen with our blessing. You chose him over your family. Live with it." My knees almost gave out. My mother didn't call. My brother didn't text. No explanation, no warning. They had planned this to humiliate me, to punish me, to remind me that in their world, love was conditional. I swallowed hard, lifted my chin, and did the unthinkable. I walked down the aisle anyway. Chapter 2, saying I'd do without them. People stared, some whispered, some looked uncomfortable, some looked proud. Ethan squeezed my hands as we stood at the altar. "I'm here," he said softly, "no matter what." When the officiant asked if anyone objected, silence filled the room, and then something inside me snapped. I realized something important. My family wasn't my foundation. They were my cage. I said my vows with a steady voice. "I choose you, even if the world turns its back on me." Tears ran down Ethan's face as he said his. We kissed, applause erupted, and for a moment I thought it was over. I thought the worst had passed. I was wrong. Chapter 3. The calm before the storm. The reception began. Music, food, laughter. But an unease settled in my chest. My phone kept buzzing. Unknown numbers, voicemails, texts I didn't open. Then the music stopped. The doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. 2 police officers walked in. Behind them my father, tall, stone-faced, furious. The room fell silent. "Emily Carter," one officer said, "we need to speak with you." My heart dropped. Ethan stepped forward. "What is this about?" My father spoke before the officers could. "She's committing fraud," he said coldly, "and emotional manipulation. This marriage is illegitimate." Gasps filled the room. I stared at him, stunned. "You abandoned me," you said, "and now you bring cops." He didn't even blink. "Not once. You embarrassed this family," my father said coldly, standing in the middle of my wedding reception like a king delivering judgment. "Now I'm correcting it." The police officers standing beside him shifted uncomfortably, clearly sensing tension. They didn't fully understand yet. The music had already stopped. Every guest in the ballroom was staring. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead, while whispers spread across the room like wildfire. My wedding dress suddenly felt heavier. Ethan stepped closer beside me, protective, steady, the exact opposite of the man standing across from us. My father straightened his expensive suit jacket and looked at the officers with complete confidence. The confidence of someone who had spent his entire life being obeyed. "She stole money from the family trust," he announced loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "She forged documents and transferred assets illegally." A murmur rolled through the ballroom. I watched people glance at me with confusion, curiosity, judgment. My father continued before anyone could react. "She's emotionally unstable. We've tried helping her for years. The performance was flawless." Calm voice, controlled posture, perfectly rehearsed concern. If I hadn't lived with him my entire life, I might have believed him too. One of the officers looked toward me carefully. Ma'am, we'd like to ask you a few questions privately. My father smiled slightly. That smile, God, I hated that smile. It was the smile he wore whenever he believed he had already won. The smile he used when intimidating employees, when controlling my mother, when threatening me, when reminding everyone in the family who held the power. I have evidence at home, he added smoothly. Everything is documented. That was his mistake, because the version of me standing in that ballroom wasn't the frightened daughter he remembered controlling. 3 years earlier, when he threatened to cut me off financially unless I ended my relationship with Ethan, something inside me had finally awakened. At first, I panicked, I cried, I begged. Then one night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at his text messages, and realized something horrifying. My father didn't love conditionally. He controlled conditionally. Everything came with strings attached: money, approval, affection, support, even silence. If you obeyed him, he rewarded you. If you challenged him, he punished you. And for most of my life, I had confused that with love. So, I started preparing quietly. I documented every threat, every email, every conversation, every financial record connected to the trust. I hired a lawyer without telling anyone. Not because I wanted revenge, because deep down I knew someday I would need protection. Standing there at my own wedding reception, watching my father attempt to destroy me publicly, I realized that day had arrived. The officer cleared his throat politely. Ma'am? I looked directly music at him. I would like my attorney present. The change in my father's expression was immediate, tiny, almost invisible, but music, I saw it. For the first time that evening, uncertainty flickered across his face. You don't need a lawyer, he snapped quickly. I held his gaze. Yes, I said calmly, I do. The room fell silent again. Ethan squeezed my hand. My father laughed softly, trying to regain control. This is ridiculous. No. What was ridiculous was a father trying to have his daughter investigated during her wedding reception because she dared to build a life outside his control. The music officer stepped aside to make several calls. My father folded his arms confidently. He still believed this would end the way it always had with me, surrendering, apologizing, breaking. But something fundamental had changed inside me months earlier. I was no longer trying to earn his love, and once that happened, his power began dying. The ballroom buzzed with whispers. Guests pretended not to stare. My mother stood near the entrance, frozen in place. She looked terrified. Not for music, me, for appearances. That was always her priority. Maintaining peace, protecting reputation, avoiding conflict. Even music, if it meant sacrificing me, especially if it meant sacrificing me. I remembered being 16 years old, standing in our kitchen while my father screamed because I wanted to apply to colleges out of state. My mother stood nearby, silently washing dishes while he called me selfish. Controlling people rarely operate alone. They music survive because someone nearby keeps excusing them. A few minutes later, my lawyer joined by speakerphone. Her voice echoed clearly through the ballroom. Professional, calm, prepared. Emily has full legal authority over the trust assets assigned to her. My father's face tightened. The claims being made against her are entirely false. One of the officers asked about the financial accusations. My attorney responded immediately. We possess extensive documentation proving ongoing attempts of financial coercion against my client. The room shifted. You could feel it happening, the energy changing. Guests who had looked suspicious moments earlier now looked confused, then uncomfortable, then concerned. My father interrupted angrily. That's absurd. My attorney didn't even pause. We also possess written threats sent by Mr. Holloway demanding compliance in exchange for financial access. Silence. Complete silence. The officer turned slowly toward my father. Sir, is that true? For the first time in my life, I watched my father hesitate just for a second. But it was enough, because powerful people survive by appearing certain. The moment doubt appears, the illusion starts cracking. My attorney continued speaking, while years of buried truth finally surfaced in front of everyone. The trust wasn't solely controlled by my father. Legally, portions already belonged to me. The transfers were valid, the accusations were false. Every lie he told collapsed one by one beneath actual evidence. My father's face slowly lost color. Then came the sentence that changed everything. "Sir," the officer said carefully, "filing a false police report is a serious offense." The ballroom went dead quiet. No music, no whispers, nothing. I looked at my father, really looked at him, and for the first time in my entire life, he looked afraid. Not angry, not dominant, afraid. The realization hit me harder than I expected. My father wasn't powerful because he was strong. He was powerful because everyone around him was scared to challenge him. The moment someone finally did, everything started collapsing. My mother stepped forward shakily. Emily, tears filled her eyes. I stared at her and felt absolutely nothing. No rage, no heartbreak, no desperation, just clarity. She had watched him hurt me for years. Watched him threaten me, humiliate me, control me. And every single time she chose silence. "You had your chance," I said quietly. Her face crumpled, but I couldn't comfort her anymore. That version of me no longer existed. The officers pulled my father aside for additional questioning. Guests stared openly now. Some looked embarrassed, others shocked. A few quietly slipped toward the exits. My father's carefully crafted image was cracking apart in real time. The successful executive, the respected businessman, the commanding music patriarch. All of it suddenly looked different because once people see manipulation clearly, they can't unsee it. The officers eventually escorted him outside. Not in handcuffs, something worse, humiliation, public humiliation. And the man who spent his entire life protecting his image looked completely destroyed by it. The ballroom remained painfully quiet after he left. Then slowly, unbelievably, the music started again. Soft at first, then louder. Conversation slowly returned. Ethan wrapped his arms around me and suddenly I started crying, not from sadness, relief, pure relief. Because the worst thing I feared my entire life had finally music happened. My father publicly rejected me and somehow I survived it. More than survived, I felt free. We left for our honeymoon 2 days later. No dramatic goodbye, no final family confrontation, no emotional speeches. Just peace, real peace. For the first time in my life, I experienced silence that didn't feel threatening. Months passed. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived, not an apology, a threat. My father demanded the immediate return of family-controlled assets, or he would pursue legal consequences. I actually laughed reading it, because he still didn't understand. I wasn't emotionally reacting anymore. I was strategically responding. My lawyer reviewed the letter carefully, then smiled. "He's panicking." "What happens now?" I asked. She slid a thick folder across the table. "Now we finish it." The countersuit wasn't emotional. That part mattered. No screaming, no revenge speeches, no dramatic accusations. Just evidence, precise, organized, devastating, false police reporting, financial coercion, documented emotional abuse, threats, emails, recordings, signed documents, years of proof. When the case became public, everything changed quickly. Partners started distancing themselves. Board members requested meetings. People who once admired my father suddenly avoided him. Because reputation is fragile, it survives only as long as people believe the performance. My father had built his entire identity around control and respect. Now both were disappearing publicly. One evening, my mother appeared unexpectedly at my apartment. She looked older, smaller somehow, like carrying years of silence had finally become too heavy. "I should have protected you," she whispered. I believed she meant it. That was the tragedy. People can genuinely regret hurting you and still not deserve access to your life anymore. "You watched him destroy me," I said softly. Tears rolled down her face. I thought keeping peace was helping. "No," I looked directly at her. "You protected his comfort, not my safety?" She cried harder. Part of me wanted to comfort her automatically. Old habits, old survival instincts. But healing sometimes means refusing to abandon yourself again. I hope you find peace, I told her honestly, but not at my expense. Then I closed the door. That was the last time I ever saw her. The courtroom months later felt strangely anticlimactic. My father entered looking older than I remembered, not physically, emotionally, like the weight of losing control had finally exhausted him. When it was my turn to speak, I stood calmly. No trembling, no fear, no need for approval. I wasn't abandoned because I was wrong, I said clearly. I was abandoned because I stopped obeying. My father stared at the table. He couldn't meet my eyes. The judge ruled quickly. False reporting confirmed, damages awarded, restraining order approved. Just like that, the man who once controlled every aspect of my life legally lost access to it forever. But the truth is, what hurt him most wasn't financial loss. It wasn't public embarrassment. It wasn't even the court ruling. It was irrelevance. I stopped fighting for his love, stopped chasing approval, stopped trying to fix things. I simply walked away. And men like my father don't know how to survive becoming unimportant. 5 years passed. Ethan and I built a beautiful life. Quiet mornings, honest love, peaceful evenings, a home filled with warmth instead of tension. No manipulation, no conditions, no fear. One afternoon I saw my father's name mentioned in a news article. Former executive, legal issues, estranged music family. I stared at the screen for several seconds, waiting to feel something. Anger, satisfaction, music, sadness, anything. But there was nothing, just closure. People think revenge looks dramatic. Screaming matches, public destruction, courtroom victories. But honestly, the strongest revenge is becoming untouchable. My father thought abandoning me at my wedding would destroy me. He thought sending police would scare me back into obedience instead. He accidentally gave me freedom. Because the moment I stopped needing his approval, he lost every weapon he ever had against me. And that became the one thing he could never forgive.